Okay, here's a very quick tutorial in how to get drum stems or splits out of Logic. So right here I've got a instrument track in Logic. I've called it Easy Drummer. In the instrument I'm going to go and put instruments Easy Drummer. Stereo output. I'm going to go and just for fun I'm going to use the indie folk kit. It's going to load here. At the same time I'm going to find indie folk and I'm going to grab a mid-tempo loop. I'm going to grab one of these ones here. Let's see what this sounds like. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to drag that onto my drum tracks. There it is. I'm going to set my cycle region to be about that long. Just looking here at Easy Drummer loading up. While this is getting set, I'm going to close this out. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to go into Easy Drummer, into the mixer, and we're going to, in succession, we're going to solo each kit piece. So here's the kick in, here's the kick out, here's the snare top, here's the snare bottom, here's the hi-hat, here's the rack tom, here's the floor tom, here's a stereo overhead track, here's a stereo ambience track, and here's a mono ambience track. So the ambience tracks are room mics. The overhead track is where you're going to get most of your cymbals in Easy Drummers because there's not close mics on the cymbals like there is in Superior Drummer or other drum packages. So what the first thing we're going to do is when we solo each of these kit pieces, we're going to record that onto a new track. Now, if you're in a real drum session, kick, snare, and hi-hat, and rack tom and floor tom are each going to be usually recorded by one mono microphone. So there'll be one mic inside the kick drum, there'll be another mic outside the kick drum, those will both be mono. The snare top will usually be like an SM57, it'll be in mono. The snare bottom might be another SM57 or maybe a condenser, again mono. The hi-hat will be something like an AKG 451 or some other small diaphragm mic. The rack tom is usually something like a Sennheiser 421, as is the floor tom in a lot of cases. The overheads, you might have a pair of ribbon mics like Cole's 4038 or something like that. The ambience channels might, especially the mono channel, might be a large diaphragm condenser that was going to be running through a compressor. So a lot of these mics are going to be in mono. Now, by default, Logic has got kind of a funny way of handling tracks. They can be either stereo or mono. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the output of Easy Drummer. Instead of to the stereo outs, I'm going to set it to the first bus that's open in my project. Now there's nothing else in my project right now, so bus 1 is open. I'm going to rename that drum split because I'm going to be using bus 1 to capture the output of Easy Drummer for all these mono channels and then the stereo channels over here and then again the mono ambience mic. So the next thing I'm going to do is create some new tracks. New tracks. You can see the hotkey there. I'm going to say audio. I'm going to grab, let's see, how many tracks do I really want? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 tracks, 2 of which are going to be stereo, the rest are going to be mono. So here we go. The input is going to be bus 1. You can choose it right here. You don't have to set it up anywhere else. The output of all these drum splits is going to be output 1 and 2. I'm going to say 10 tracks. Create. There's my 10 tracks. Now if you want to do it would be a good idea to rename these right now, because then when you do the recording, the name of each of these tracks is going to be stamped onto the audio file, and if anything goes wrong later, it's much easier to figure out where you are. Rack tom, floor, tom, overheads, ambience, stereo, ambience, mono. Alright, now I'm just going to open up the mixer here. I'm going to hit X, which is my hotkey to bring up my mixer. There's my mixer. You can see here's all the tracks that are actually selected right now. Kick in, kick out. Whoops. How about out? Snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, rack tom, floor tom, overheads, ambient stereo, ambience mono. So these here are the two tracks that are going to be stereo. These other ones are going to be mono, and it's easy to switch them to a mono input. Here's my input string by just clicking on the circle. 2 circles is stereo, 1 circle is mono. So I should be able to select all these guys. There, they all flick to mono. So all these mono inputs. Here's 2 stereo tracks. Here's a mono input. And while we're at it here, the bus, we don't actually have to have any output on the bus because we're just using it for an input to get stuff onto these other audio channels. So now we're going to go through and we're going to record. I'm going to go back to the arrange page. We're going to have our drums here. We're going to get Easy Drummer up so we can have a look. We're going to go into the mixer. We're going to solo the kick in. I'm going to record enable that track. I'm going to go and turn off my click because I'm ready to go. Here I go recording. Cool. I'm going to go to the next track, record enable. Now we're on kick out. I'm going to go in the Easy Drummer mixer. I'm going to solo kick out. Here we go. Going to hit record. Great. Now I'm going to move on to snare top. Okay, now you might be wondering, wow, where'd that kick come from? Did I do something wrong in the mixer? No. If you go back and you mute the 2 kick tracks that we've already recorded, and I'm just going to play this time. There you go, only snare. So let's do that from now on, just so we can keep track of what we're doing. Here we're going to go to snare bottom. And sounds like a snare bottom, and you can hear a little bit of kick bleed in there, which makes sense because here in the Easy Drummer mixer we've got bleed on, so the kick drum, which is just a couple inches away from the snare bottom mic, is going to bleed into the snare bottom mic. That's pretty realistic. Okay, hi-hat. This is obviously a very exciting drum loop to use for a hi-hat, because there's not actually any hi-hat in this loop. Wow, that is some stunning hi-hat playing. Okay, rack tom. There may not be any rack tom in this one either, but we'll check it out here. You can see that there were some tom hits, but I had the channel muted, so that is why. I'm going to go back over to the floor tom now. Here we are in the floor tom. Okay. Overheads. Great. And now you know why there's no hi-hat in this piece, because most of it is played on the ride cymbal, and then there's a couple of crashes. And like I said, Easy Drummer doesn't have any close mics on cymbals, so all the cymbals come through the overheads. Now let's check out the ambience stereo channel, or stereo room mic channel. Right, sounds like a room mic. Now we're going to go to the mono ambience channel, mono room mic. Cool. Okay. So now we're back to everything being recorded here. If I mute my original drum track and I unmute these guys, we should see that we have these tracks here are going to be mono. You can see there's a single circle. These tracks here are going to be stereo and mono ambience. And if I click the audio bin open in Logic, you can see there's all these regions here. Again, mono regions, single zero or single oval. Here's the stereo tracks. Just like that, looked like it worked out. And I'm going to play. Now if you're going to go and solo the overhead track and listen for where the toms show up in the stereo spectrum, and then solo the rack tom and the floor tom, you're probably going to end up having to pan the rack tom and floor tom out a little bit to the left and right so that they match the image in the overhead. Same thing with the hi-hat, because it's probably going to be, depending on whether this was the drummer's perspective or the audience perspective, it's going to be off to one side. Anyways, there's your tracks. Now in Logic, the easiest way to get these tracks out of Logic, well, you could pull this out of the way and drag them into a folder on your desktop. You can also open up the Project Audio bin again. Here's your track. There's a trick here. If you click on the name of the region, you can say Show Files in Finder. There's also a hotkey command there. So this is going to bring up here's my project. I happen to call this one Logic. Recording drum splits, audio files. There's all the files. You could take these guys, you could compress them, make them into a zip file. There it goes, there's my zip file. You could call it drum splits. You could just unarchive it just to make sure that everything's there. You could click on one, hit the space bar. Yeah, it's working. So I'm just going to delete this. So then you just take the drum splits and you could go to your Dropbox, open up your Dropbox, drag that into one of your folders for your collaborator, and you're all set. So that's a really quick and dirty way how to record drum splits from a virtual instrument in Logic, making sure that they end up with the correct file type. Mono for mono sources, stereo for stereo sources.